All right, y'all. First and foremost, give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his son, the Hamashiach, some called Yahweh, Yehoshua, um, Yahushua. We mostly know as Jesus Christ. Excuse me. I wanna briefly read a little history that a lot of people overlook, or they may not know about. That we did go into Egypt way before, way before the transatlantic slave trade. And some of the sources that we're gleaning from, we're misusing, we abusing, we're just taking little things out and not reading and not dealing with the whole thing. And even when I'm reading this to you, this is from Josephus, Wars of the Jews. All right, the history of the destruction of Jerusalem. This is book 6, chapter 9 is where we gonna go to, and we gonna get straight to the point, y'all. We gonna get straight to the point. That there was a captivity, at the 70 AD, right? During the 70 AD situation, we end up getting shipped to darn Egypt. He says, and now since the soldiers were quite tired, this is what we starting at right here. Since the soldiers were quite tired from killing men, and yet there appeared to be a vast multitude still remaining alive, Caesar gave orders that they should kill none but those that were in arms and oppose them, but should take the rest alive. But together with those whom they had orders to slay, they slew the aged and the infirm. But for those that were in their flourishing age and who might be useful to them, they drove them together into the temple and shut them up within the walls of the courts of the women. You see a little separation there, the courts of the women, over which Caesar set one of his freed men, as also Fronto, one of his own friends, which last was to determine everyone's fate according to his merits. So this Fronto slew all those that had been seditious and robbers, who were impeached one by another. But of the young men, he chose out the tallest and most beautiful. They was into some funny dunny stuff over there in Rome. All right, they has one of those Roman emperors that was super sassy, and reserved them for the triumph. And you know about that triumph and the arc of the triumph, where you see the visual of them pillaging the temple and taking all of those things back to Rome as a victory for the triumph. They're gonna take those tall, beautiful men also. And as for the rest of the multitude that were above 17 years old, he put in bonds and sent them to the Egyptian mines. All right, Fronto, the rest of them that were above 17 years old, he put into bonds and sent to the Egyptian mines. Titus also sent a great number into the provinces as a present to them, that they might be destroyed upon the theaters by the sword and by wild beasts. But those that were under 17 years old were sold for slaves. All right, so those under 17 sold for slaves. Those over 17, they went to the Egyptian mines, and then a great number of them went into the provinces to be in the theaters, pretty much to be in them gladiator scenes, fighting off animals, being killed by the sword, so forth. Now, during the days wherein Fronto was distinguishing these men, there perished for want of food 11,000. And 11,000 of these men just died of starvation, some of whom did not taste any food through the hatred that guards bore to them, and others would not take any when it was given them. The multitude also was very great, that they were in want even of corn for their substance. Now, the number of those that were carried captive during this whole war was collected to be 97,000, as was the number of those that perished during the whole siege, 1,100,000. The greater part of whom were indeed of the same nation with the citizens of Jerusalem, but not belonging to the city itself. For they were come up from all the country to the feast of unleavened bread. So he called them when they were feasting for the unleavened bread, and were on sudden shut up by an army, which at the first occasion so great a straitness among them, that there came pestilential destruction upon them. Y'all help me out with that word there. And soon afterwards, such a famine as destroyed them more suddenly. And this city could contain so many people in it, manifest by the number of which was taken under Cessius, who was desirous of informing Nero of the power of the city, who otherwise was disposed to contemn that nation, entreated the high priest, if the thing were possible, to take a number of the whole multitude. So these high priests, upon the coming of that feast, which was called the Passover, when they slayed a sacrifice from the 9th hour to the 11th, but so that a company not less than 10 belonged to every sacrifice. So they wanted, because they knew all of these people were coming in from all of these different nations, they wanted to try to get a census on how many people are in Israel at the moment. And he entreated the high priest, because they're doing all the sacrificing, and the high priest understood that there was like a law where it had to be at least 10 people to each sacrifice. So, you know, he can kind of count, you know, if you know how many sacrifices you did, you can kind of estimate from there. What was I? For it was not lawful to feast singly by themselves. It wasn't lawful for you to do the to keep Passover by yourself. You gotta be mindful of that. And many of us are 20 in the company. Found a number of sacrifices were 56,500, which upon the allowance of no more than 10 that feast together amounts to 2,700,700 persons that were pure and holy. All right, that's how many was there. Close to 3 million people were there for the Passover. For as those that have the leprosy and gonorrhea, and women that have their monthly courses, or so as otherwise polluted, it is not lawful for them to be partakers of this sacrifice, nor indeed any foreigners, neither, who came hither to worship. But that's all I wanted to deal with there, is that where we see that they were shipped to the or they were sent into the Egyptian mines. Those that were 17 years old, he put them in bonds and sent them to the Egyptian mines. You know, while they're during the destruction of Jerusalem. And you see here at the end, there's a good note here too at the end. We'll read this last passage here. And thus was Jerusalem taken in the 2nd year of the reign of Vespasian, on the 8th day of the month of Gorpius. It had been taken 5 times before, though this was the 2nd time of its desolation. For Shishak, the king of Egypt, and after him Antiochus, and after him Pompey, and after them Sosius and Herod took the city, but still preserved it. But before all these, the king of Babylon conquered it and made it desolate 1,468 and 6 months after it was built. But he who first built it was a potent man among the Canaanites, and is in our own tongue called Melchizedek. All right, Josephus trying to give a little history or the thought process or the history or the oral traditions that were taught in that day. Was a potent man among the Canaanites, in our own tongue called Melchizedek, the righteous king, for such he really was, on which account he was there, the first priest of God, and the first built temple there, and called the city Jerusalem, which was formerly called Salem. However, David, the king of the Jews, ejected the Canaanites. We have to understand that first. That that land of milk and honey, that land where the Lord put his name, there were Canaanites there first. And, you know, initially he used Israel to punish those Canaanites. And drive those. He raised up a nation to punish them and drive them out because of them shedding blood of the innocent, them sacrificing children to Molech. Ejected the Canaanites, their destruction, and set tide his own people therein. And it was demolished entirely by the Babylonians 477 years and 6 months after him, and from King David, who was the first of the Jews who reigned therein, to their destruction under Titus were 1,179 years, but from its building to its last destruction. And I'm curious why, you know, he's saying David is the first instead of Saul. That's interesting. To the last destruction were 2,170. Titus, let me see. Under destruction under Titus were 1,179 years, but from its first building to its last destruction were 2,177 years. Yet have not its great antiquity, nor its vast riches, nor the diffusion of its nation, nor all the habitable earth, nor the diffusion of his nation over all the habitable earth, nor greatness or veneration paid to it in a religious account been sufficient to preserve it from being destroyed, and thus ended the siege of Jerusalem. Now I want to read this last little couple pages of this last source here, Babylon to Timbuktu. This is in our camp starter pack. This is one of the first books they want you to buy, and they want you to buy the book for this particular chapter here. For this section. This really all they want you to buy the book for. In the year 65 BC, the Roman armies under General Pompey captured Jerusalem. In 70 AD, General Vespasian and his son Titus put an end to the Jewish state with great slaughter. During the period of the military governors of Palestine, many outrages and atrocities were committed against the residue of the people. During the period from Pompey to Julius, it had been estimated that over 1 million Jews fled into Africa, fleeing from Roman persecution and slavery. Why? Because the Romans were persecuting and the Romans were enslaving. We just read that in Josephus, where the Romans were sending them to the Egyptian mines, and those who were seditious and robbers, that dude Fronto that was hired by Caesar, he was killing them and destroying them. And then some of the folks he was sending into the theaters to be in Nero's circus, to be eaten by lions, to fight off grizzly bears, or whatever. Whatever entertained these sick people. It says the Jewish markets were full of black Jewish slaves. All right, and so we just assumed, and people telling us that this was us being sent and sold to West Africa. If you turn over a page, it's telling you right here, North African black Jews. These people are going to North Africa. They're not going to West Africa. They're going to North Africa. Um, he quotes Deuteronomy 28:64. This prophecy and all the residue of the prophecies contained in Deuteronomy 28:15 befell the black Jews after they disobeyed the laws of God. Many nations transported the Jews into slavery, and the sons of Israel transmigrated to every continent. All right, and he's gonna get into that. But again, this is North Africa. The Jewish philosopher, because he's talking about the continent, but yeah, they went into Africa. But here he's speaking about North Africa. The Jewish philosopher Philo, about 40 BC, 40 AD, who lived in Alexandria, Egypt, said that 1 million Jews resided in Libya and Egypt, from the Catamos to the borders of Ethiopia. All right, and this is Libya and Egypt is northern Africa. Professor A.H. Godby says that Philo leaves us doubtful about which boundaries of Ethiopia he meant. I think that Philo meant the western southern boundaries of Ethiopia, because the prophet Zephaniah mentioned from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, daughters of my dispersed. There was a period over 600 years. Now, where does he talk about West Africa? Right here. You just go over a couple pages. You just got to keep reading. You keep reading. You see here, he's talking about the Black Jewish Empire of Ghana. And here, like the ancient Black Empire of Ghana was established in Western Sudan. He's pretty much the migration due to commercialism, due to trade, and being expelled out of certain countries. They end up selling in Western Sudan and then end up migrating to West Africa. But this is established in this chapter. All right, it's established in this chapter. This is where you're supposed to have your stuff highlighted. But we don't even touch this area. We don't touch it. All right, and here you again, they get into Turkey, they get into Africa. I mean the Berbers. One point they linked up with the Berbers. They was even talking about, watch this right here. Then a Jewish queen named Daya Kahina organized an army consisting of Jews and Berbers in order to stop the penetration of the Muslims in North Africa. So the Jews teamed up with the Berbers under this Jewish queen named Daya to try to fight back the Muslims. And the Berbers are known for enslaving white people. They was one of the first people to gathering white people up and gathering Europeans up and enslaving them. They have a crazy history. But listen, man, we have to dig into these things. And like I said, I am not no historian. I'm not trying to be no historian. I'm just saying that I'm just looking back at some of the things that I was taught and that I gleaned information from. I'm going back, fact checking it, making sure it's all right, and then finding out there was some other things and some other information there that we should have been latching on to, and that, you know, some of this information might have been a little misleading and misused. And I ain't saying it was done on purpose, but either way it go, we gotta make corrections. If you know, we gotta make corrections. We gotta make sure we teaching these things correct and being exact on these things as much as we can. You know, if we're extracting this history, I have to look more into this Queen Daya. If I find some, you know, I'll do a little short lesson on it. But I pray this thing was edifying. Y'all go back into that kingdom of that Babylon and Timbuktu. Make sure y'all tighten up on them things, man. Read the book. Read the book. And Josephus, you know, that's one of those historians. Again, I told you we're gonna get into Josephus. We're gonna get into Philo, among other historians and church fathers, so we can truly understand this thing, because there are a lot of gaps between 70 AD in West Africa. We gonna have to fill those gaps in. We gonna have to figure out what's going on between there. Shalom. See you on the next one. Make sure y'all hit that like, subscribe button, and that notification bell. Peace.